calling all instructional coaches, curriculum specialists, teachers on special assignment, or whatever they call you. I'm Matthaeus Huelse.
And I'm Katie Ritter. As instructional coaches, we are often responsible for our own professional learning and can sometimes feel pretty isolated in our role.
That's why we're here, bridging the gap with a wealth of tips, tricks, and building a community of coaches.
So hit the restart button with us.
Recharge your coaching batteries.
And hopefully you'll leave feeling just a little bit less on your own coaching island.
All right, welcome back, dear listeners. Today we are diving into the power of positive feedback with our in-studio guest, Jill Dubois. Jill is here to share her expertise on how uplifting, purposeful feedback can drive real growth for educators. Through her work with the EdgeU Badges Program, Jill has seen firsthand how micro-credentials and well-placed encouragement can inspire teachers, boost their confidence, and foster a supportive community. Today, we're thrilled to have Jill Dubois here, an educator and creative force with 2 decades in the classroom. Now a professional learning specialist with Forward Edge, Jill spends her days helping teachers leverage simple, impactful strategies to make learning both effective and joyful. Known as the optimistic originator of imparted joy, she's also a talented watercolor artist and children's book author and illustrator, bringing inspiration to both students and educators. Jill's work is all about fostering an educational environment where positivity and purpose lead the way. Welcome, Jill.
Thank you.
All right.
Well, Jill, this feels strange looking at my seat, but for our listeners who don't know, Jill lives in Florida full time, and so she was visiting us at our offices in Ohio this week. So I thought it would be fun to let Jill have the seat in the real podcast room for a change, because usually she's joining us virtually. So we thought that would be a fun turn of events. But I think many people, I do think, know you, Jill, online and have connected with you on social media, whether it's through EdgeU Badges, through conferences, just in the larger education community on Twitter. Because you do such a great job of forming connections, building relationships, and really just making people feel welcome and at ease. So while you are not a current instructional coach, which is primarily our audience, I think the foundation of coaching is building relationships. It is building teachers up. And I think there's no one better for our audience to learn from than you. And so I'll kind of set the stage just a little bit. So Jill works on our team and she leads our EdgeU Badge review team. And so 100% of the work that Jill is doing, other than attending conferences, is virtual. And so you have found a way to completely virtual build relationships really quickly with the educators who use the program. And a huge responsibility that you have is giving feedback through educator submissions to help them grow. So I'd love for you to touch on just a little bit, because even if our audience isn't virtual, I think there's so much we can learn from your tactics and your strategies. So I'd love if you could speak a little bit. What are the things you think about? How do you go about building some of these relationships with educators that you're not even necessarily looking in the eyeballs? And so let's just talk about the relationship building first, and then we'll pivot to the feedback, because I don't think you can give feedback without having that relationship first.
Yeah, I think that a lot of this is the relationships are the cornerstone, right? That's where everything else is built from. So even going back to when I was an educator in the classroom, it was you have to get to know your kids. You have to get to know their learning styles. You have to get to know your colleagues and your peers. And it's all about that community, and it's all about building that community. And I always say it goes back to my son loves Legos. He's 26 and he still loves Legos. But when he was very young, I mean, you take Legos and you dump them out and there are pieces everywhere, and that's great. Right? And sometimes there's manuals and you build those Lego sets with those manuals, but sometimes you don't. Sometimes you just take piece by piece and start putting them together and build something. And that's the way I feel like that's what I'm doing, is just taking those little pieces. And they're all coming together to build something special with the relationship. And it doesn't have to be any big deal. People get so afraid of building relationships because they're like, oh, but I'm an introvert. I don't want to talk to people, or I don't want to, and I am too. I mean, I love being here in the office. I love the pulse of the culture here, but I enjoy being at home and getting my work done. I do miss community and I miss fellowship. Building community and building those relationships with these people online, virtually, I am a coach. Like, I'm coaching thousands of people every day and don't really even think that that's really not what I'm doing. I'm not coaching, I'm building those relationships with them. In my world, that's kind of like getting to know people, but not, it's like personally, sometimes I'll ask them personal questions. Sometimes I'll just say like, hey, how's the weather out in California? What did you do today? Or, what student like really made you impressed with one of their actions today or their behavior? And, it's just, they're like, why does she care about that? Like, because we're human. We all crave that human interaction and those personalized touches. I know when I was an educator and I was in the classroom and I was using EdgeU Badges, and I remember submitting my badges and submitting that evidence, and it was like, wait, somebody just replied back to me. Like, I better be on my A game. I can't just like copy and paste stuff. Like, I need somebody is watching, somebody is listening, somebody is giving me feedback. And that meant the world to me, even if it was just a, hey, great job, Jill. I'm so, appreciate you taking the time to really be thorough and be accountable with this. I'm like, wow, I can do that. Like, that's my passion, is to make people feel valued and worthy and accountable, but yet in a non-threatening, like, let's just take this one step at a time and build those relationships. But this is how we're doing it. Like, just talking back and forth.
Yeah, I'm going to push you a little bit deeper. What are some things, like tangible things that you think you do that are making those educators feel valued?
I would definitely have to say just respecting where they are and respecting where their position is. I know they often will say in their reflections or their submissions that, hey, I'm a pre-service teacher. I don't even have a classroom yet, but here's what I would do if I had to use this tool or this strategy and implement that in the classroom. And those are my favorites because I like to come back and say, you are going to be an awesome teacher. I can't believe you already have the mentality of your instructional practice. Like, you're on the right pathway. Keep going and so building them up and just saying, hey, and I'll even take it one step deeper. Sometimes I'll do that with them too. And it's like, tell me, what is one way you think this is going to impact your classroom? How is this going to engage your students? Or consider doing this. I think it's just that mutual respect and that mutual trust that we build. And that just, I don't know, it's just super special. And they'll often come back and respond back. It may just be a, hey, thank you. It may be a, oh my goodness, I never looked at it that way before. But it's always something. So that gives me some affirmation too, that, okay, I'm doing the right thing. I'm not pushing anybody like over the edge, wanting to leave the profession before they even get started.
No one's going to want to leave the profession when they talk to you, Jill. But I love how you said that, because I think that is exactly, whether someone's working online like you are, or our coaches who are listeners, most likely face to face with teachers. I think you really hit on something that's really big that I want to encourage our listeners to reflect on. And that was listening for those moments of doubt and insecurity, in a way, right? Like, for them, whether it's like justifying, hey, this is why my submission took this angle, or it's a moment of doubt and insecurity about how their work may be perceived, right? I mean, that's ultimately what it's boiling down to. And you're not letting that slide, right? Like, you are taking the opportunity to address that. I can't tell you how many times I've heard, oh, I'm so bad at tech. Right? That's a moment of doubt and insecurity that teacher is sharing with me. That's a moment of vulnerability that they're sharing with me. And as a coach, to build that relationship, to express that mutual respect, like you're saying, if we don't let those opportunities slide, but we take a minute to address them and really build that educator up, can go a long way to create that relationship, and establish that mutual respect, like I think you touched on. I think that's huge. I just don't want to let that slide under the radar for our audience to listen to. So I want to pivot a little bit. What are some little tips, again, because again, you're not face to face to have this really elaborate feedback conversation. Sometimes it is asynchronous, the feedback that you're giving. So what are some little tips that you might give some other educators working to support other educators when we think about like little ways to make a big impact with positive feedback?
Yeah. I think number one is remove the two words, great job, from your vocabulary. Because those are the two, like, overused. Nobody needs to hear that. It means nothing. It honestly means nothing. You have to expand on that. You have to give it context. You have to give it humanity. So that's every time I'm reviewing something, I'm like, okay, don't say great job or well done. We want to tell them why we told them what we told them. And it's not to like Pollyanna everything. It is because we really want them to grow from it. We don't want them just to be affirmed. We want them to really gain that confidence and change their growth mindset if it's going in the wrong direction. We want to pivot that into the right pathway for them. And I think that's where so many, like you were saying, well, I'm not tech savvy. And I'm like, sometimes they'll come back at me and say that. And I'll say, do you use a Google search? Do you use Siri? Do you use a GPS? Like, you are using tech every single day. So you're doing that. You can do this. Like, let me show you how. And it's, again, those little Lego pieces. Just keep building and building and building. It's everybody is wanting to expect something all at once because we're in such a instant gratification world where we want it to happen now and we want it to be, I'm great at what I do. I'm the best at what I do. And no, we're never going to be like that. So we need that room. We need that room. Don't just say great job. Say, okay, this is great, and here's why. So I always try and preface it. Always try and put some context behind it. So
I think it is a good one. It made me realize that I think I just say, love that, awesome. I like to podcast response. We talked about this in a previous episode with Chrissy Lauterbach a little bit ago, Radical Candor. And one of the principles of her book about positive feedback and praise is you never give positive feedback without being very specific about what it is that's positive. And that's exactly what you're saying. If for nothing else, to reinforce the really good things that they're doing. How do I know what it was that was really great about what I did? Because there's probably something that's not so great, even mixed in or that I could work on. So I think that's a really valuable tip and reminder to just remember to not be blanket, paint a brush. This is good to build someone up, but to really be specific, because that is the piece that makes somebody feel valued and seen, is the specificity in the praise, in the feedback itself.
Well, now that you've removed pretty much all of the starters for good feedback, great job, well done, love that, all of that's gone from the list now. But feedback cannot always be positive. Sometimes you have to be constructive, right? Longtime listeners of the pod will know we already killed the compliment sandwich on this podcast before. That's done. Do you have any advice for us on how can I make the bitter pill to swallow a little bit more palatable?
It's so funny that you would say this because today I was reviewing some badges and this girl finally, this educator, after probably 3 weeks, finally came back a fifth time and submitted something that just I kept repeating, hey, you are off to a great start, but if you go back and review the tasks, let me just give you a few little pointers of what you could focus on and let's resubmit it. And she finally came back today and gave me this beautifully written paragraph. And I knew it was written from her heart because I could tell. And I was like, yes. And this time I didn't even give her written feedback. I called it a sticky note. So I gave her a little audio recording and just said, oh my gosh, fifth time's a charm. Thank you so much for your perseverance and your dedication because that was a lot. That is a bitter pill to swallow when you have somebody keep coming back at you going, okay, I'm going to try it again. It's okay. It's okay. We are not expected to be perfect. We want to have that. I don't even call it criticism. We want to have those actionable steps that we need to take to make us feel successful. And Katie, you've done that with me too. You've shared with me like, Jill, you're way too hard on yourself, okay? Perfection is not what we're looking for here. Sit with the discomfort. And the more you sit with it, the better you get at it. And the more you go, okay, if somebody is telling me something I need to work on, that's not a reflection on my efforts. It's something that I truly just need to turn around and make a very positive thing for me so I can grow and I can learn.
And it's hard for you as the feedback giver too, right? Because it would be easier to just at the third or the second submission to just say, you know what, it's good enough, let's move on, let's go to the next thing, right? That is tempting.
It is.
That is impressive. This was one particular person you're giving feedback to, and did you have the feeling, I can push that person, I can push them to do it 3, 4, maybe a 5th time? Would you do this to every person? Would you do this with everyone? Or can you kind of tell, maybe this is someone I can push, this is someone that I'm going to maybe give a little bit more room?
I love that question because that is completely true. So yes, for her, in her case, I knew she's very tech savvy. I knew that what she submitted was great. It just needed some context and some explanation behind it. And how did you implement it with your students? And I knew that she could do it because I had seen her other submissions. So yes, there are other cases. If I'm really going to be as inclusive as I possibly can. So if we've got learners whose first language is not English and they are struggling to put a paragraph together that makes sense or fits what is being asked of them, I will very gently handle those. If it comes back a second or a third time, it's, you know what, I appreciate your efforts here. So let's go ahead and I'm going to approve it and let's keep working towards moving on. Do what you're doing and we'll keep communicating. So again, it's that respect, it's that trust. Let's keep going, but I understand you're doing the best you can right now and you've put way more than 30 minutes into this badge. So great job. And that happens, again, it's about knowing who you're responding to and who you're talking to. And another big piece of that, I communicate with educators, but I also communicate with district partners and district administrators who are implementing these programs and these micro-credentials with their educators. So it's keeping a pulse on them too. So I'm communicating with them, keeping them supported, encouraged to make sure they're being that champion for their educators that they can be with our program. So
that's awesome.
That is great, Jill. I want to pull out a little nugget that you said a couple of minutes ago, just because I don't want it to get lost, because I think it'd be super helpful, especially when I think about our listeners who serve huge districts or a lot of buildings or incredibly rural, and geographically they're very far apart and they physically can't be face to face with their educators. So they might be emulating a bit more of this type of virtual support and feedback that you're talking about. And I love how you use Mote, M-O-T-E, that tool that allows you to create the audio recording. Because written feedback, I think sometimes when we're reading things, we've all been in a situation where we read an email or a text or a message and we're like, what the hell? You know, we took it wrong because we didn't hear the tone of voice. We didn't hear that positive inflection or the very chill inflection that we added to it. So I love how you use that opportunity to switch up how you're giving the feedback. And again, not only is that a different way to give feedback, but it's also another way to continuously build that relationship, because me hearing your voice is now making a more human connection with you as opposed to just reading something. So I wanted to pull that little piece out that you said too, so that didn't get lost in the shuffle of the convo. I am going to pivot, and I think building a little bit on what Matthaeus was getting at, how do you handle damage control? So you've given feedback, and we know that with feedback, appreciation, right, it's not always received in the way that we intended it. And while you, I think, do a great job of knowing your audience, we can't always anticipate the place that every person is at and how they're going to receive that feedback in that moment. So how have you handled if someone has maybe taken your feedback harsher than gotten defensive? How do you kind of manage that damage control?
It's hard virtually, but it's also easier virtually because, again, you don't know their tone. One that came to my mind was, I don't know what else you want me to do. I've submitted this 3 times. And I have to sit with it for a minute because I'm like, oh my gosh, was I too hard? Was I not making myself clear? But then at the same time, I'm like, we're going about this not face to face. We're not seeing each other. We're not having a conversation. And again, coaching educators in one school, you can always run to their classroom and go, hey, what was that email about? What do you mean? What else do you want me to do? They're knowing I'm on the other end of this and I'm on the receiving end of this, and they want an answer. I can't run down to their classroom and help them. So I just, honestly, I sit back. I have a 5-second rule where I count back 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and breathe. Changes something in my brain, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to respond back to them now. Okay, I can do this. Because I do get defensive. Like,
Well,
I
you're
know,
human, like the rest of us.
yeah. And I'm a recovering perfectionist, so I definitely struggle with them coming back with those kind of things. So when I take that 5 seconds and I approach it from, hey, I appreciate your effort. Let me see if I can clarify it just a little bit better for you. And then that's usually when I'll give more audio feedback with the moat. Sometimes I'll even do a little screencast. If it's something I can do, a screencast tutorial for them that maybe they just didn't catch the first time. I really try and be kind. I know they're stressed. Who knows what kind of day they had? Who knows what is going on in their classroom right now? And they got another please resubmit notice. And that just like set them off for the day. So you never know the circumstances. So that's why you have to be so objective about just going, okay, let's just do this calmly and come back. And then I've never had anybody, and maybe that person didn't come back and say, thank you so much for coming back and clarifying that for me. I really appreciate that. Rarely do we get that. But I know that I've done my job the way that I want to do it with dignity, and for them, I want to hold their dignity as high priority.
The way that you said when you described the clearly frustrated response back was you self-reflected. So you said, was I too harsh? Was I not clear enough? And I think that's a really hard thing to do, especially in the moment. And so I appreciate that about your response. And I would encourage our listeners to, even if it's frustrating, because we are all human, right? But I think that the more we can stop and do some self-reflection before we just respond back to make sure that we're being clear and kind, I think that that could go a long way. Because I always remind myself, even when I get frustrated, like, oh, I put it clear as day, and this email or problem with communication is illusion, it's been received, right? So I think that's a smart thing that you do, to start with some self-reflection before responding back in those moments.
I'm going to squeeze in one more little question before we go on break. I'm wondering, so we've hit all these different dimensions. We've talked about the relationship can impact how I give feedback. We talked about how the way that I give feedback is impacting it and it changes my approach. What about the trends you might see within certain communities? Because you are probably working with teachers that come from one community and then teachers that come from another community. Are there any things that you notice when you compare them as groups? And are there any trends, things that make or break a community and their ability to deal with feedback, I guess?
And maybe not so much community groups, but maybe the education, the levels of where they are. Mm-hmm. If it's classified staff that are doing the work, or if it's elementary, you can definitely tell elementary versus intermediate and secondary educators. The tones are different. I mean, it's a little more structured. The intermediate secondaries, we're a little more structured. Here's the standards we're aligning this to. Elementary's like, hey, we're just over here having fun. We're playing some Kahoots and doing some quizzes. So there is definitely a different dynamic between those groups. It also changes my tone of feedback too.
Yeah, of course.
So I'll be like, that's really awesome. I've never been in a 10th grade AP chemistry class before. Tell me a little bit more about what kind of things you are going to be doing with this. Very interesting, because I've never been in that arena before. I can relate more with the elementary educators. I'm like, go, that is so fun. I loved that question about farts. That was like, oh my gosh, what did your kids think about that? They were probably dying.
An elementary teacher.
So it's so much fun. So yeah, seeing again is just building those relationships, getting to know them, but aiming that feedback at where they're at. Okay. So yeah, the trends, I don't really see any trends as far as maybe with different tech tools in different areas. There are certain maybe districts that I know are not as tech savvy or not as tech heavy. So I'm a little more, I see the simplicity and want them just to, let's learn how to take a screenshot, right? Yeah. Let's share that Google Drive link, make it shareable. And then you've got the high flyers who know what they're doing and can get through badges and,
Makes sense.
Yeah.
I do think, Matthaeus, I'm going to make a little plug though for our listeners. I think you're getting at a topic that I would love to interview someone who's had a lot of experience with like culturally responsive coaching, because I do think based on your culture, parts of the country or world that you come from, I do think that can very much impact how a coach may want to think about providing feedback. So if we have any listeners who are experts on that, reach out, because I think that would make an awesome episode. But I'm going to break us really quick to hear from our sponsors.
Looking for a program that reaches all teachers in learning new tools to integrate in their lessons? EdgeU Badges is the answer. EdgeU is an anytime, anywhere badging program that is designed to take bite-sized tools for instruction and teach teachers how to use them. EdgeU has received the ISTE Seal of Alignment for educator standards, and each badge in our expanding library is aligned to the ISTE standards and the SAMR model. Learn more about the program that teachers call addicting at forward-edge.net/EdgeU Badges.
Unlock the full potential of instructional coaching with Forward Edge, your partner in professional growth. Instructional coaches play a vital role in supporting teachers, students, and administrators across the district. And research consistently highlights coaching as a powerful catalyst for improved teacher instruction and enhanced student achievement. But here's the question: who's supporting the coach? Enter Forward Edge, your dedicated ally in professional development. Our flexible mentorship options, recognized by the ISTE Seal of Alignment, are tailored to meet your unique needs as an instructional coach. So ready to elevate your coaching journey? Visit forward-edge.net to explore how we can empower you with the knowledge and support you need. Start your journey with us today.
All right, welcome back, everybody, from break. We are still here talking with Jill. We're going to wrap it up with our favorite question for the end of the episode. Jill, what are your top 3 tips and tricks that you can give our listeners for giving feedback that is both constructive and motivational and positive?
I would say always, number 1, be authentic. Tell them what you're thinking. Tell them what you're seeing. I would say create space for them to grow. Give them an actionable step. Give them, it's something small. Maybe next time, take that little Lego piece and put it on here. And I think the last thing is just that personal touch. Don't forget, we're all human and we all need to learn from each other. There's nothing like just communication.
Yeah, very good reminders for all of us in any kind of situation that we're in potentially. Yeah. Well, Jill, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for being in the studio with me. This has been awesome.
Jill, where can we find you on social media?
Oh, at Imparted Joy.
Imparted Joy.
Yep.
Perfect.
Anything else you want to share?
At www.impartedjoy.com. Yeah, it started out as a hashtag that I used when I first joined Twitter to impart joy.
That's amazing.
Yep.
What kind of books can our listeners find on that site?
Oh my goodness. Well, all of my artwork, and I write children's books that have social emotional learning messages. Mm-hmm. So from anywhere from age 0 to 99.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for being here, Jill. Thank you, listeners, for being with us and listening to our episode. This has been our final episode for Season 4. We will be back in January with a brand new season chock full of new tips, tricks, lots of top 3 tips from lots of very intelligent people. Check our social media and make sure you follow along as we are getting ready for Season 5, early January.
Thank you, everyone. We'll see you in January.
Thanks for spending time with us today. If you found this episode helpful, please share it with an educator friend.
And connect with us on social media at RRCoachCast to let us know what you thought of the episode and what topics you want us to discuss next.
New episodes drop every other Tuesday. Be sure to subscribe to Restart Recharge wherever you listen to podcasts.
So press the restart button.
Recharge your coaching batteries and leave feeling equipped and inspired to coach fearlessly with the Restart Recharge podcast.
A Tech Coach Collective.